guacamole, the Democrats got shellacked. La, 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 la. And a lot of it had to do with Republicans finally embracing some libertarian ideas. So how big of a victory was this for liberty lovers across the land last night? As you know, Republican Glenn Youngkin defeated establishment Democrat Terry McAuliffe for Virginia governor. And man, oh mercy, did that lead to a wonderful and delicious lefty meltdown. Watch.
Some of it was dog whistle racism.
1,000%.
But it's essentially white identity politics. That works for Republicans.
Education, right, which is code for white parents don't like the idea of teaching about race.
The real ominous thing is that critical race theory, which isn't real, turned the suburbs 15 points to the Trump insurrection endorsed Republican.
The Delta variant of Trumpism. In other words, Youngkin, same disease, but spreads a lot faster and can get a lot more places.
Stop trying to make critical race theory a thing. It's not a thing. Oops. More on that a little later in the show. But I got a news flash for you, ding-dongs. Youngkin ran on issues like the economy and education. McAuliffe ran against Trump. Trump is not president, but the economy is cratering, inflation is on the rise, and distrust of politicians is at an all-time high. Will liberty continue to shape the landscape in 2022 and beyond? I certainly hope so, and we'll do it with this guy at the helm. In studio, in New York City, 2020 Libertarian Vice Presidential candidate, Spike Cohen. Hi.
Hi, I'm happy to be here.
I'm so happy that you're in the studio.
Yes.
It's so weird to see humans. It's like boink, boink. The Matrix is real. So let's discuss this a little bit last night, because there are a lot of things that I think are very good for the liberty-minded. What was your big takeaway?
Dog whistle racism. No, I think what it really was, I think this was a few things. I think, first of all, they were rejecting Biden and everything that's come from Biden in the last few months. I think that this was another example of voters rejecting the lockdowns and the mandates and all of that. And I think specific in Virginia, this was rejection of the idea that government controls your children and not the parent. And it was a rejection of the idea that education should be something that government is mandating instead of what the parent wants.
Are you surprised today? I mean, looking back on that clip, that little montage of people who were having pretty predictable reactions. Like, I always think if your party really takes it in shorts, you should be honest about it and just say, we're doing something wrong. What are we doing wrong? And at least have a conversation with voters about it, instead of just claiming all of them are racists who don't know what they're talking about. Because critical race theory is not just something that is taught in universities at the advanced degree level. It is something that has really infiltrated schools. As a public school parent, I will tell you, affirmative, yes, it is there.
Here's the thing, though. If we just let parents decide what and how their children are being taught, then all of these debates we're having on CRT, on trans kids in sports, all of this stuff, it goes away, because now it's a matter of what the parents are deciding they want their children to be subjected to in schools. And that's the problem here, is that everyone's fighting over what everyone is going to have imposed on them and have imposed on their children. And this was parents saying overwhelmingly, we don't want that.
But maybe there are parents who want that. And maybe there should be schools that teach critical race theory,
and
which I don't have a problem with at all.
Exactly.
And I'm going to talk about this a little bit later with Corey DeAndros. We're going to get into the topic of education pretty deeply. But one of the other big issues that was on the ballot, at least in Minneapolis, was that ballot measure dealing with defunding the police and replacing it with the Department of Public Safety. And what I have been saying all along is, you know, libertarians have always had the best strategy for criminal justice reform. The left and the right had a big opportunity, and they've completely blown it.
Yeah. What this was nothing of the sort of what we propose. This was a rebranding. It did not end the war on drugs. It did not change the hiring practices or the educational practices or training practices for the police. All it did was change them from the Minneapolis Police to the Minneapolis Public Safety Department, and instead of reporting to mayor, they report to city council. This would be the equivalent of dyeing Derek Chauvin's hair pink and giving him a nose ring and pretending they fixed the problem. And it didn't, and that's why it was rejected, not just from the right, but from people on the left, too.
And it wasn't a structural change. It wasn't a series of changes that will have measurable positive results, which is ultimately what people want. They want to thrive.
Yep.
They want to feel safe.
Yep.
And they ultimately want government to leave them alone, which
Yep.
I think that's one of the things you saw in many of the races across the country last night. How did Libertarian candidates do?
Libertarian candidates did great. Just in Pennsylvania alone, we won over 100 races. And nationwide, we won, it's somewhere between 150 and 200. We're still getting the final count on some of them.
Libertarians running under the Libertarian Party or as Republicans?
No, running as Libertarians. That doesn't include, Liberty Independents, Liberty Republicans, and so forth. That's Libertarian Party candidates, Libertarian Party endorsed and run candidates that have won races across the country.
Is that the best showing the party has had?
I believe it's one of the best shows. We now have, I think, somewhere around 500 elected officials. So we grew it by something like 40% yesterday. So it was it was a big showing. Now most of those are local and regional races, but that's where we need to win. We need to show people what libertarianism looks like in their backyard before they decide to put us in the White House.
I think that's great. And you're one of the few people that has really been pushing those local races and to people get involved in the issues that are closest to them, that matter most. And that's where they're going to change so many minds. Spike Cohen, great to see you.
Good to see you too. Thank you for having me.
Look at this, lighting up the studio.